Right, Nathan, from the Andes to the Atlantic Ocean along the Amazon River, how far is it all up?
We travelled about 6,800 kilometres all up, Meech.
So what made you think, hey, wouldn't it be cool? This is a Mackay boy. He thinks, hey, wouldn't it be cool to follow the Amazon River its entire length?
That's a damn good question. It actually happened. I was over in Africa at the time, and I was running a river operation over there, and I was in my early 20s, and it was quite stressful for me. It was my first kind of management position, and I had a good friend of mine, and she kind of saw that I was pulling my hair out, and she gave me this book, and she said, Nathan, whatever you do, find the time to read it. So I found the time to read it, and it was about the first ever successful descent of the Amazon River, and it was by a chap called Joe Kane, and the other gentleman that was with him was a guy called Peter Chmielewski, and for the paddlers amongst us, he's like a river legend.
Uh-huh.
And when I read this book, there was something in me that kind of, sparked alive, if you like, and I couldn't really pinpoint it at that stage. Then within about a 3-month period, a good friend of mine invited me back to Australia to be his best man in his wedding, which I accommodated, came back, and
Over a couple of beers at the wedding reception.
for some strange reason, when I rocked up as a bit of a gift for me coming over and being his best man, he gave me this book.
Same book.
It was a
Are
different
you-
book, but it
oh.
was about the third ever successful descent, and it's like, what?
What is
So
this
as I
about?
started reading it, I kind of, within, 50 pages or so, I knew, yeah, I want to do this. And
Yeah.
it kind of, I was able to kind of pinpoint, wow, yeah, that's the feeling.
So you did the paddle with a friend of yours.
Yeah, I did it with a chap called Mark Kelch.
Yep.
We'd kind of had a friendship from early days when we played a bit of rugby together, and we were both kind of into outdoor pursuits.
He's a
And
Mackay boy as well, isn't he?
he is, yeah. Yep.
So two Mackay guys, and there was another member of the party as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, Phil Swart was the third member of the team. He's a South African, and
Okay.
myself and Mark had both worked with Phil over in Africa on the rivers.
So what's your excuse? Do you hang around the Pioneer too much when you're a kid, mate, or what's the go?
There was crocodiles in ours, and that wasn't challenging enough
Did
for you.
You hang around up there around Cattle Creek, up Finchette Gorge during the, during the big wets or something? What's the fascination?
That's also a good question. I suppose in my early years growing up in Mackay, when you have floods and things, I always was...
You always played in them back then because
yeah, you
weren't
could.
old enough and mature enough to know that you
You
shouldn't.
didn't really know the dangers. That's right.
Or care.
But I suppose I really got serious about paddling when I was introduced to it on a commercial level over in Africa. I did a lot of travel in my 20s, and I had an uncle over in Africa who was basically a river guide over there. And I think I was in the UK at the time, and I gave him a call and said, listen, it's raining, it's cold, I want to get back to the outdoors. And he said, well, come over here and give this a whirl. So that's what I did, and just fell in love with it straight away. So that's kind of the fascination with rivers, and, one thing led to another.
Well, I mean, for your first river descent, geez, you picked a biggie. Shouldn't you warmed up on the Murray or something, or what?
Always go hard, Meech, that's what I say.
Yeah, party hard to
Yeah,
go home.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a bit about the trip itself. I'm told that to actually get to the Andes where the Amazon starts, now, that's a trek in itself. Just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, the initial trek was where the Amazon actually first starts as a tiny trickle of water is 5,200 metres above sea level, and that's through the Andes. And as you know, the Andes are the second highest mountain range on the planet.
If you're listening at home, by the way, that's just a bit taller than Youngala. Just so you know.
Just a little bit.
5,200 metres above sea level.
Mark was probably the most experienced hiker amongst us. He had done a fair bit of that in the past and had kind of dealt with a bit of altitude as well.
Uh-huh.
I was super fit when I went there, but I don't know if you know too much about altitude sickness. It's one of those things that doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter how fit you are or
Yep.
how strong you are, even in the mind. When it gets a hold of you, it sorts you out. And I was kind of really affected by that. And the first time I'd experienced altitude sickness to that degree, and I must admit, it's like, what's going on here? I can't. You can't kind of push through it. The more you try and push through it, the sicker you become, and the more detrimental it comes for not only yourself but the group as a whole.
And when you're saying you're sick, just describe what you can remember about this altitude sickness as it came on. It's not exactly like you throw up or burst out in hives. It's completely different, I'm told.
Yeah, I think it started out as like a bit of a dull headache, and then as I pushed harder and harder, that dull headache kind of turned into migraine kind of stuff, constant nausea. You know, I couldn't eat for days. It was an effort to kind of keep down or get down liquids, and I think the thing that affected me most was I could only walk like 20 metres before I had to stop, get my breath back.
No.
And it's like, what's going on here? This is ridiculous.
Frustrating for a fit
And you're like
guy.
going, I'm fit.
Yeah,
I
that's
haven't
what
had a
it's
beer
like.
in months.
Not good for the ego.
Well, that would have been killing you.
Yeah.
And so as you're doing this, you still have to get to point A to start the big trip, so to speak. It hasn't even started yet, and it's challenging you already. What were you thinking?
I think in that early period, I was a little bit concerned because any good hiker or any good climber worth his weight kind of knows proper climbing etiquette is once you feel the effects of that altitude, you come down a level, stay there for a day or so to reacclimatise, and then you move forward. But we had the dilemma of rising water levels due to seasonal snowmelt, plus also rains in the Amazon drainage area that were feeding into the Apurimac River, which is the first part of the Amazon. And the longer we left it, the more dangerous that river became, and it's one of the most dangerous rivers around as it is. So
you're experiencing altitude sickness, and then you're feeling guilty, and you're having to try and push through so that the whole team doesn't fail at the whole mission.
That's about right. You know, we all were aware that if we left it too late to get to the river, it became a death run, and none of us wanted to die.
So when the altitude sickness kicked in, what about 4,000 metres, something like that, a bit earlier?
Yeah, I actually felt it around 3.5, just the onset of it, and then as we
300 metres taller than Mount Cook or Mount Kosciuszko.
and then as we pushed a bit further, it just kind of got out of hand. It wasn't probably until after we'd finished the hike that I'd had a good chat with Phil and was a little bit more coherent that he was actually quite concerned and was getting close to the point of kind of saying enough's enough, you know.
Yeah.
So, but we made it through.
What happened? Do you just snap out of it, or your body just gets used to it and then you're okay, or do you wake up one day and go, oh, I feel fine, let's do it?
Yeah, it is a bit like that. It's not a kind of gradual thing that disappears. Well, it wasn't for me. I know that it's almost as if as we began the descent down towards the river, within a couple of days, I'd noticed a little bit of difference, and then one day I woke up and thought, well, there's no headache there.
Wow.
Well, I think the oxygen was always an issue, but there was no headache, there was no nausea, you could operate a lot better, you could think clearly. Yeah.